How do I talk to my GF about her manipulative tendencies? We have been together for a little over 2 years now, and for the past 5 months, we've been navigating the uncharted territory of living under the same roof. When we first decided to move in together, I imagined it would be an exciting new chapter, a step forward in our relationship, a way to deepen our connection, and a chance to see how we fit as partners in daily life. For the most part, things have been smooth sailing. We've established our routines, shared meals, and created cozy moments that make our apartment feel like home. Yet, there's one recurring issue that has quietly cast a shadow over this otherwise harmonious picture: bedtime. Before we started living together, she had her well-established routine. She was the kind of person who cherished her wind-down time, often retreating to bed by 9:30 or 10 o'clock to read, reflect, or simply drift into sleep. It was a rhythm that worked for her, bringing her a sense of calm and order. On the other hand, I've always been more of a night owl. My energy doesn't begin to wane until closer to 11 or midnight, and I've long relished the quiet solitude of late evenings, my time to unwind, to delve into the virtual worlds of video games, to reconnect with distant friends, or simply to enjoy a little slice of independence. When we discussed moving in together, I knew our differing sleep schedules might require some adjustments. I wasn't naive. I understood that cohabitation meant compromise. I thought, surely, I can nudge my bedtime a little earlier on most nights. I even entertained the idea of syncing up more often, leaving my cherished late-night gaming sessions for just a couple of nights each week. It felt like a reasonable trade-off, a small concession to make for the person I love. But as the weeks turned into months, that minor difference in schedule started to feel less like a compromise and more like a growing tension. It wasn't the kind of tension that explodes into arguments or leaves you questioning the relationship. It was subtler than that, simmering in the background, a quiet discord that gnawed at the edges of our otherwise happy life together. At the heart of it was this: my desire to occasionally stay up late and enjoy my own interests, and her preference for us to go to bed together. For her, bedtime wasn't just about sleep, it was a ritual, a shared experience, an unspoken affirmation of intimacy and companionship. For me, it was a practical choice governed by when my body felt ready to rest. This seemingly simple difference began to open a gap between us that neither of us seemed fully equipped to bridge. It's not that I didn't want to spend time with her or share in her routines. Most nights, we would cook dinner together, laugh over a favorite show, and talk about our days before she signaled it was time to wind down. I'd follow her to the bedroom, staying close as she settled in, and often I'd even read or scroll through my phone until she fell asleep. But on the nights I craved a little extra time for myself, those rare evenings when I longed to sit down at my desk, fire up my computer, and lose myself in the comforting rhythm of a game, the balance we had worked so hard to establish felt fragile. I genuinely believed we could find a middle ground. But was it really possible to reconcile my need for a bit of solitary time with her desire for shared closeness? As I reflected on this seemingly small dilemma, I began to realize it was less about bedtime and more about the unspoken expectations and compromises that shape a life shared with another person. That understanding didn't make the situation any easier. If anything, it only made me more aware of the complexity of our new life together and the fact that even small differences, when left unaddressed, can grow into something much larger. 1 to 3 nights a week. This quiet tension escalates into a full-blown ritual, one that has become as predictable as it is exhausting. The scene always unfolds in the same way. Late in the evening, after we've shared dinner and some downtime, I'll casually mention that I'd like to stay up a little later to play video games. It's a simple, honest statement, devoid of malice or hidden meaning. I'm not trying to reject her or distance myself. I'm just expressing a desire for some personal time. But before I can even finish my thought, I'm met with a barrage of complaints, nagging, and questions that feel heavier with every repetition. "Why don't you want to spend time with me?" she'll ask, her voice tinged with frustration and hurt. "Don't you want to be with me? Why don't you love me? Don't you love me?" The questions tumble out in rapid succession, blending together into a whirlwind of doubt and accusation that leaves me scrambling for a response. By the time she reaches the inevitable conclusion, fine, I guess I'll just go to bed alone, the guilt is already settling over me like a weighted blanket. Every time, I find myself mumbling a half-hearted reply, my words tangled in a web of confusion and frustration. I don't want to hurt her feelings, but I also don't think I'm asking for too much. More often than not, I end up giving in, shutting down my plans for the evening just to avoid the argument and the lingering discomfort it brings. I'll trudge to bed alongside her, feeling a strange mixture of resentment and resignation. It's not that I don't care about her or enjoy spending time with her, I do, deeply. But in those moments, it feels like my needs and desires are being swallowed whole by her expectations. The thing is, I know she doesn't mean to hurt me. When she's in the middle of one of these episodes, it's clear that she's joking, at least to some extent. Her tone is exaggerated, her words laced with a dramatic flair that suggests she's not entirely serious. But even if her complaints are half in jest, the underlying message is hard to ignore. She would much prefer that I abandon gaming altogether and align my schedule with hers. That realization cuts deeper than I'd like to admit, leaving me feeling like a selfish, inconsiderate partner. And yet, by the time morning rolls around, the slate is wiped clean. She's all smiles and affection, as if the previous night's tension never existed. I wish I could move on as easily as she does, but the guilt lingers, casting a shadow over our otherwise happy relationship. It's as if her ability to shrug it off only deepens my internal conflict. If it doesn't matter to her in the long run, then why does she react so strongly in the moment? And why can't I seem to let it go as easily as she does? To be fair, she doesn't always react this way. There are rare occasions once or twice a month, if I had to estimate, when she'll surprise me by simply saying, "Okay, have fun," and heading to bed on her own. In those moments, I feel a surge of gratitude and relief, as if a weight has been lifted from my shoulders. But those instances are so infrequent that they feel like exceptions to the rule, fleeting moments of reprieve in an otherwise unrelenting cycle. What makes it even harder is the nagging feeling that I'm not being unreasonable. I'm not asking to stay up late every night or to retreat into my gaming world at the expense of our relationship. On the nights I want to play, we've already spent time together, we've shared a meal, watched a show, or talked about our day. By the time I mention wanting to game, the evening is essentially over for her, but for me, it's an opportunity to unwind in a way that feels meaningful and fulfilling. The fact that this was never supposed to be an issue makes it all the more frustrating. Before we moved in together, I was upfront about my gaming habits. I told her how important it was for me to have that outlet, not just as a form of entertainment but as a way to recharge and maintain connections with friends and family who live far away. At the time, she assured me it wouldn't be a problem. "Don't worry about it," she'd said, her tone reassuring. But now, I can't help but wonder if those words were meant to placate me, to make the transition to living together smoother. Did she really mean it, or was she just saying what she thought I wanted to hear? As these questions swirl in my mind, I'm left grappling with how to address the issue in a way that feels constructive. Every time I try to bring it up, it feels like she doesn't take it seriously. The other night, she casually asked me how I thought living together was going. It felt like the perfect opening, a chance to air my thoughts without framing them as a confrontation. I told her, honestly, that things were good overall but that I wished she could be more understanding about my gaming. Her response caught me off guard. She shrugged it off with a dismissive smile, saying she didn't mind that much. It was as if she was rewriting the narrative, downplaying the frequency and intensity of her complaints. I wanted to push back, to explain how her behavior made me feel, but the words caught in my throat. The last thing I wanted was to seem like I was accusing her or blowing things out of proportion. So I let it go, even though the unresolved tension continued to gnaw at me. Now, I find myself at a crossroads, unsure of how to move forward. How do I make her understand that this isn't just about gaming, it's about feeling heard, respected, and supported in our relationship? How do I express my needs without making her feel like I'm rejecting hers? And most importantly, how do we find a way to bridge this divide before it becomes something larger than either of us anticipated? All of this really bugs me for two main reasons, and the more I think about them, the harder it becomes to shake the frustration. The first reason is simple. I don't think I'm being unreasonable. I'm not asking for something outlandish or unfair. It's not like I want to come home every night, lock myself in a room, and play Fortnite until the early hours of the morning, completely neglecting her and our time together. I just want to stay up late a couple of times a week, to have that small pocket of time to myself in addition to the time we already spend as a couple. Whenever I choose to game, it's after we've shared a full evening together. We've already had dinner, enjoyed a show or a movie, or just talked and relaxed. By the time I express my desire to game, the night is essentially over for her. She's winding down, ready to sleep, her day already concluded. It's not like I'm abandoning her in the middle of a shared activity or cutting into our time together. But despite all that, the moment I mention staying up, it's like a switch flips, and I'm suddenly faced with what feels like an emotional tidal wave. She doesn't just express disappointment or ask me to reconsider. Instead, it often spirals into a full-on tantrum, complete with exaggerated accusations like, "Why don't you want to spend time with me?" or "Don't you love me?" As if my choice to game for an hour or two is some profound declaration of rejection. The dramatics leave me feeling cornered, as though I'm failing as a partner simply for wanting a little personal time. And while I know some of it is exaggerated for effect, it doesn't make the experience any less draining. The second reason it bothers me, and this one stings even more, is that none of this is a surprise to her. We talked about this before we moved in together, and I was crystal clear about my needs. When we were discussing the logistics of living together, I made it a point to bring up gaming because I knew how much it mattered to me. It wasn't just a passing hobby or a casual interest, it was something that helped me decompress, recharge, and stay connected with people who are far away. I told her, honestly and directly, that the biggest thing on my mind was being able to maintain that part of my routine. I explained how gaming wasn't just entertainment for me, it was a form of introverted time that allowed me to unwind and a way to stay in touch with friends and family who live in different states. I wanted her to understand that this wasn't about choosing a screen over her but about holding onto a piece of myself that mattered. At the time, she had assured me it wouldn't be a problem. She told me I shouldn't worry about it, that she understood and was fine with it. But now, I can't help but question whether those words were genuine or if she was just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. Did she truly mean it, or was she trying to smooth things over to make moving in together seem more appealing? The possibility that she may have been less than honest or that she underestimated how much it would bother her feels like a betrayal, even if it wasn't intentional. What frustrates me most is the inconsistency between what she said and how she's acting now. If this was going to be an issue, why not address it before we moved in together? Why not have an honest conversation about her feelings so we could find a compromise up front? Instead, I'm left wondering if I've been misled, whether intentionally or not, and that thought alone opens a whole other can of worms. The situation feels increasingly unfair. I'm trying to respect her needs and adapt to our shared life, but it feels like my needs are being dismissed or minimized in the process. I've already shifted my schedule to align with hers most nights, even though it's not my natural rhythm. I've willingly traded in some of my late-night solitude for shared evenings and bedtime routines. But when I ask for just a little bit of that time back twice a week, maybe it feels like I'm met with resistance that's disproportionate to the situation. It's not just about gaming anymore, it's about feeling like my voice isn't being heard and my needs aren't being valued. This was supposed to be something we could navigate together, a balance we could find as a couple. Instead, it's turned into a recurring source of tension that makes me question how well we really communicate and how much we truly understand each other. And that, more than anything, is what keeps me up at night. My final point, and the one I keep circling back to, is that I genuinely don't know how to approach discussing this with her in a way that feels productive. Every time I try to bring it up, it seems like it falls on deaf ears or gets brushed aside. It's not that she outright dismisses me, but there's this underlying sense that she doesn't take my concerns seriously. And maybe that's the crux of the issue. I feel like my needs aren't being treated with the same weight as hers. The other night, she caught me off guard by asking how I thought living together and our relationship were going. It seemed like a perfect opening, a chance to have an honest conversation about something that's been bothering me. I kept my tone casual, not wanting to make it a bigger deal than it needed to be. I told her that, overall, things were good and that I was enjoying living together, but I wished she could be more understanding about my gaming habits. I deliberately didn't get into specifics. I didn't want to sound harsh or overly critical. The last thing I wanted was to come across as if I were attacking her, especially when the rest of our relationship is solid. But instead of taking the opportunity to have a real discussion, she shrugged it off with a dismissive response. "I don't mind that much," she said, as though the entire issue was imaginary, as if she hadn't made a big deal about it multiple times a week. That moment felt like a kind of gaslighting, intentional or not, because her words didn't match the reality of our experiences. The countless nights where her comments and complaints left me feeling guilty and frustrated didn't align with her casual dismissal. It was as though she was rewriting the narrative, minimizing the problem to avoid a deeper conversation. And the worst part was, I let it go. I didn't press her on it or try to explain how her behavior was affecting me because I didn't want to escalate things. Instead, I kept quiet, once again pushing my feelings to the back burner. But now, as I sit here replaying that moment in my head, I can't help but wonder how much longer I can keep brushing this under the rug. It's not just about gaming, it's about the underlying dynamic in our relationship. It's about whether my needs and boundaries are being respected and whether we can communicate openly about the things that matter to us. And the truth is, I'm not sure we're there yet. So how do I bring this up in a meaningful way? How do I make her understand that this isn't just about video games but about feeling heard and supported in our relationship? I don't want to frame it as an attack or make her feel like she's failing as a partner. But at the same time, I can't keep pretending this doesn't bother me. Maybe the key is to approach it from a place of vulnerability. To tell her, plainly and honestly, how her reactions make me feel, how they leave me feeling guilty and conflicted, as though my needs are somehow less important. I need to explain that gaming isn't just a frivolous hobby for me, it's a way to recharge, to connect with friends, and to carve out a little space for myself in a shared life. And it's not about choosing gaming over her but about finding a balance that works for both of us. I'll admit, part of me is afraid of how she'll respond. What if she brushes it off again or doubles down on her perspective? What if this issue is just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of deeper incompatibilities we haven't yet acknowledged? But I also know that avoiding the conversation isn't a solution. If we're going to build a life together, we need to learn how to navigate these kinds of conflicts, how to listen, compromise, and meet each other halfway. I care about her deeply, and I want this relationship to work. But I also know that for it to truly thrive, we both need to feel seen and valued. And that starts with an honest conversation, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. It's not just about finding a way to coexist, it's about creating a partnership where both of us can feel whole, supported, and understood. And that's worth fighting for, even if it means stepping out of my comfort zone and speaking my truth.